Imagine walking into a five-star hotel. You've built it from the ground up, invested millions, and turned it into a thriving business. But the moment you step inside, the staff look at you with suspicion. Instead of a warm welcome, you're met with cold stares, harsh words, and then security is called to throw you out. Why? Because they assume you don't belong. Now, imagine their shock when they realize the person they just disrespected is actually their boss, the owner of the entire hotel. This unbelievable true story will leave you speechless, and trust me, you'll want to stick around till the end to see how justice is served. Buckle up, this is about to get interesting. Welcome to Mr. Robert's Story. Today, we uncover a shocking story of mistaken identity, prejudice, and a lesson in humility. A highly successful black entrepreneur entered one of her own luxury hotels, only to be dismissed and forcibly removed by staff who failed to recognize her. Their assumptions led to a serious mistake. But when the truth surfaced, the consequences were swift and unforgettable. Stay with us as we break down this unbelievable turn of events. Ava Sinclair had built her hospitality empire from the ground up. As a self-made millionaire and owner of multiple luxury hotels, she had spent years perfecting every detail of her businesses. Her properties were known for world-class service, elegant designs, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. But on this particular day, she decided to visit one of her most successful hotels unannounced, a decision that would reveal a troubling reality within her own establishment. Dressed casually in a simple blouse and jeans, without the usual entourage that accompanied her on official visits, she walked into the grand lobby. The hotel was breathtaking. High ceilings, glittering chandeliers, and an air of sophistication that reflected the hard work she had put into making it one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. As she moved toward the front desk, she noticed something strange. The receptionist barely acknowledged her presence, keeping their eyes glued to the computer screen as if she were invisible. Clearing her throat, she offered a warm smile. "Good afternoon." The receptionist finally glanced up, but instead of a welcoming expression, they gave her a look of disinterest. "Yes? Can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to take a look around," Ava replied politely, maintaining her composure. The receptionist frowned. "Are you a guest here?" She paused for a moment. Normally, when she visited her hotels officially, the staff rolled out the red carpet. But today, she wanted to see how an everyday visitor, someone unknown and unannounced, was treated. "Not at the moment, but Before she could finish, the receptionist cut her off. "Ma'am, this is a private establishment. If you're not a guest, you can't just wander around." Ava felt a sinking feeling in her chest. She had always preached to her employees about the importance of exceptional customer service, about treating everyone with dignity and respect, whether they were VIP guests or first-time visitors. And yet, here she was, standing in the very hotel she owned, being treated like an outsider. "I understand," she said carefully, keeping her voice calm, "but I just wanted to see—" "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the receptionist interrupted, sounding even more impatient. "We don't allow loitering in the lobby." Ava took a slow, measured breath. "I'd like to speak with the manager." The receptionist scoffed, clearly irritated. "Our manager is busy with important matters. Unless you're here to check in, there's no reason for you to be standing here." Ava's jaw tightened. Important matters? She was the most important matter in this hotel. But instead of being valued, she was being dismissed outright. Just then, she noticed something that made her stomach turn. A well-dressed white man in a tailored suit walked into the lobby. The same receptionist who had treated her with suspicion suddenly brightened up. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Hotel Name. How may I assist you today?" The contrast was undeniable. While she had been questioned and pushed aside, this man had been greeted with warmth and professionalism. She watched silently as the receptionist offered him a full breakdown of the hotel's amenities, even suggesting an upgrade to a luxury suite. Ava clenched her fists. If she, the owner, was treated this way, how many other guests, especially those who didn't fit a certain image, had been made to feel unwelcome? Still, she kept her expression neutral. "I'd like to wait for the manager," she repeated, standing her ground. The receptionist sighed in frustration and picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, They looked back at her with a smirk. Security will escort you out. Ava's stomach turned. Not only had they refused to let her speak with the manager, but now they had called security on her, without even asking her any further questions. Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived. One of them, a tall man with a stern expression, folded his arms. "Ma'am, we've been informed that you're trespassing. We need you to leave." She looked at them, then at the receptionist, who was now watching the scene unfold with satisfaction. She straightened her posture, her voice unwavering. "I don't believe I'm trespassing." The guard exchanged glances with the receptionist. "If you don't have a reservation, you can't be here." Ava took another deep breath. She had 2 choices: reveal her identity now and put an end to this, or wait and see just how far they were willing to go. She chose the latter. "I'd still like to speak with the manager," she insisted. The guard's patience seemed to thin. "Ma'am, if you refuse to leave, we will have to escort you out." The receptionist smirked, clearly enjoying what they thought was a power move. Ava felt the anger bubbling inside her, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and made a single call. The security guards and the receptionist, still assuming she was just another difficult guest, stood firm, waiting to force her out. But then, everything changed. Within minutes, senior management rushed into the lobby. Their faces turned pale as they locked eyes with her. The once dismissive receptionist took a step back, sensing that something was very, very wrong. The hotel's general manager, who had been too busy to meet her, arrived moments later, confusion and panic written all over his face. And then, the moment of truth. The receptionist, the guards, and the other employees who had ignored or mistreated her. All of them stood frozen as she uttered the words that would send a shockwave through the entire room. "I own this hotel." A deafening silence followed. The receptionist's face drained of color. The security guards shifted uncomfortably. The manager's mouth fell open as he stammered, trying to process what he had just heard. For the first time since she had entered the building, Ava saw fear in their eyes. Not because she was a stranger, but because they had just insulted, humiliated, and nearly thrown out the very person who signed their paychecks. She watched as reality hit them like a freight train. And this was just the beginning. The silence in the lobby was almost suffocating. The weight of Ava Sinclair's words hung in the air, freezing everyone in place. The receptionist, who had so smugly dismissed her, now stood rigid, their face drained of color. The 2 security guards exchanged uneasy glances, as if hoping for some sort of clarification. The general manager, who had refused to make time for her earlier, now looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Ava let the silence linger for a moment, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. She had spent years building this business, ensuring that every employee upheld the values of respect, dignity, and world-class service. And yet, in her own establishment, she had been treated as if she were an intruder. Finally, the general manager broke the silence, his voice shaky. "Mrs. Sinclair, I had no idea you were visiting today." Ava's gaze was unwavering. Clearly, the receptionist, now visibly panicked, tried to force a nervous smile. "Ms. Sinclair, I apologize for the misunderstanding. If I had known." Ava held up a hand, stopping them mid-sentence. "That's the problem," she said calmly but firmly. "You only care now because you found out who I am. But before that, you had no hesitation in treating me as if I didn't belong here." The general manager stepped forward hastily. "Please, Ms. Sinclair, let's move to my office. I assure you, this is not how we treat our guests." Ava's eyes flickered with disappointment. "But it is," she corrected, "because I was treated this way. And I have no doubt that I'm not the first." The receptionist looked down, suddenly unable to meet her gaze. The security guards shifted uncomfortably. The other employees nearby, who had witnessed everything, stood frozen, afraid to say a word. Ava turned her attention back to the general manager. "I want to know, right now, if this is how all guests are treated, or if I was singled out for a specific reason." The general manager's face turned even paler. "Of course not, Ms. Sinclair. We treat all our guests with the utmost." Ava cut him off with a sharp look. "Do you?" she asked pointedly. Because from where I was standing, it seemed like I was judged the second I walked through the door. I wasn't given a chance to speak. I wasn't asked what I needed. Instead, I was dismissed, disrespected, and threatened with removal, all without any just cause. No one dared to respond. She took a step closer to the front desk, her voice unwavering. "Tell me something," she continued. "If I had walked in here wearing a designer suit and heels, would I have been treated the same way?" The receptionist swallowed hard but didn't answer. Ava tilted her head. "Or maybe it wasn't my clothes that made you uncomfortable. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't look like the kind of person you assumed should be staying here." The weight of her words sent another ripple of tension through the room. Everyone knew exactly what she meant. The general manager stammered. "Ms. Sinclair, I assure you, our team does not discriminate." Ava let out a humorless chuckle. "You don't? Then explain why the man who walked in right after me, a white man in a suit, was greeted warmly while I was told to leave." The manager fell silent. There was no excuse, no way to justify what had just happened. Ava sighed, glancing around the lobby. The very foundation of her business was built on providing a welcoming environment for all. Yet, in her absence, a culture of prejudice had been allowed to take root. "This is more than just an incident," she said finally. "This is a reflection of how my hotel is being run when I'm not here. And that is unacceptable." The receptionist looked like they wanted to disappear. The security guards remained still, not daring to speak. Ava turned back to the general manager. "I want a full report on how guests are trained to be treated here. I want to see security footage of the front desk interactions over the last month. And I want to know how often this," she gestured at herself, "happens to people who don't fit a certain profile." The general manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Miss Sinclair. We will review everything immediately." But Ava wasn't finished. "And one more thing. Every single employee who engaged in this behavior, who dismissed, ignored, or mistreated guests, will undergo immediate retraining. Those who refuse will not continue working here." The gravity of her words sent a clear message. Change was coming, whether they liked it or not. The receptionist's voice was barely above a whisper. "Miss Sinclair, am I being fired?" Ava regarded them for a long moment. "I haven't decided yet," she said. "That depends on whether you're willing to learn from this." The receptionist swallowed hard and nodded rapidly. I am. I'll do whatever it takes." Ava gave them a steady look before turning back to the general manager. "I expect an update by tomorrow morning. No excuses." "Yes, Miss Sinclair," he said quickly. "Absolutely." She took one last look around the lobby, the same place where she had been humiliated just minutes ago. But now, the atmosphere had completely changed. The employees who had been so dismissive now stood in quiet fear. The ones who had been indifferent now looked deeply uncomfortable. And Ava? She wasn't just disappointed. She was determined. This was her business, her legacy, and she would not allow discrimination, disrespect, or ignorance to taint it. As she turned to leave, she looked back at the security guards, who had been so eager to remove her before. "You might want to think twice before assuming who belongs here," she said. With that, she walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who had just learned the hardest lesson of their careers. But the real consequences? Those were still to come. Ava Sinclair had left the lobby, but the weight of her presence still lingered. The employees stood in stunned silence, exchanging anxious glances. The receptionist, who had been so dismissive just moments ago, looked like they were on the verge of tears. The security guards, who had been so quick to remove her, now shifted uncomfortably, realizing the massive mistake they had made. The general manager, still pale, turned to the receptionist. "What were you thinking?" he hissed under his breath. I didn't know," the receptionist stammered, their voice barely above a whisper. "I just thought—" "You thought wrong," the manager snapped, rubbing his temples. He knew this was a disaster, one that could cost them all their jobs. Meanwhile, Ava walked through the grand hallways of her hotel, her mind racing. She had spent years building this empire, and now she had to wonder. How many guests had been turned away, ignored, or mistreated simply because they didn't fit a certain look? How many had been made to feel unwelcome in a place that was supposed to be for everyone? She wasn't just angry. She was furious. Her phone buzzed. It was her assistant, Olivia, who had been waiting outside. Olivia, how did it go? Ava exhaled sharply before responding. Ava, worse than I thought. We have a serious problem. Olivia, do you want me to call a meeting with senior staff? Ava, immediately. This wasn't something that could wait. If this kind of behavior had become the norm in her own hotel, it meant that somewhere along the way, her values had been lost. And she wasn't about to let that slide. Within the hour, the conference room was filled with department heads, senior managers, and key staff members. Some had heard whispers about what had happened, while others were completely unaware. But the second Ava stepped into the room, the tension became suffocating. She didn't take a seat. She didn't waste time with small talk. She simply stood at the front of the room, her sharp eyes scanning each and every face. I want to know, she began, her voice calm but firm. If anyone here can explain to me why I was almost kicked out of my own hotel today. The room went deathly silent. No one dared to speak. Ava folded her arms. No one? Interesting. She let the silence stretch before continuing. Because when I walked into the lobby today, I wasn't greeted. I wasn't asked if I needed assistance. I wasn't even given the courtesy of basic customer service. Instead, I was treated like I didn't belong. And when I asked for the manager, she let out a bitter laugh. Security was called on me. Several managers shifted uncomfortably. The head of guest relations, a middle-aged man named Richard, cleared his throat. Ms. Sinclair, I can assure you, this is not how we train our staff to treat guests. Ava turned her sharp gaze on him. Then why did it happen? Richard swallowed hard. I don't know. This must have been an isolated incident. Ava raised an eyebrow. Isolated? Are you sure about that? She turned to Olivia, who had just entered the room, holding a folder. Show them. Olivia walked to the front and placed the folder on the table. She opened it, revealing a stack of printed emails and online reviews. These, Ava said, tapping the pages, are complaints from guests who have stayed at this hotel over the last 6 months. Do you know what they all have in common? No one answered. They all mentioned poor treatment at the front desk, guests being ignored, spoken down to, or treated as if they didn't belong. And do you know who made these complaints? She picked up the papers and read from them. I love the hotel, but the check-in staff made me feel unwelcome. They barely spoke to me, but they were warm and polite to the guests in front of me. She flipped to another page. I travel often for work, and I've stayed in many high-end hotels. But at this one, I was given the cold shoulder, while my colleagues, who didn't look like me, were treated with respect. She slammed the papers onto the table. Does this still sound isolated to you? The room was silent again. But this time, the guilt was written across their faces. Ava took a deep breath before continuing. I built this hotel to be a place of excellence, a place where every guest, no matter where they come from, is treated with the highest level of respect. That is the standard I set, and yet, what I experienced today, and what I'm reading here, tells me that somewhere along the way, my vision has been ignored. The general manager, still visibly shaken, cleared his throat. Ms. Sinclair, I take full responsibility. We will retrain the staff immediately and, Ava held up a hand. Training isn't enough. The room tensed. This isn't just about customer service, she continued. This is about bias. About the assumptions people make when they see someone who doesn't fit their idea of a wealthy guest. And that is not the culture I will tolerate in my business. She turned back to Olivia. How many guests from these complaints were offered any kind of resolution? Olivia shook her head. Very few. Ava clenched her jaw. Unacceptable. She looked back at the managers. Starting today, there will be zero tolerance for discrimination, conscious or unconscious. Every single guest should be treated with the same level of respect, no exceptions. She turned to the general manager. I expect a full audit of guest interactions over the last year. Every complaint, every response. I want to know who is responsible, and I want solutions. And as for the front desk? She let her gaze settle on Richard, the head of guest relations. I expect major changes, starting with accountability. Richard nodded hastily. Yes, Ms. Sinclair. Ava's voice was calm, But her message was crystal clear. I will not allow my business to be tarnished by ignorance. If you cannot uphold the standards of respect and professionalism that I built this company on, you do not belong here. She let that sink in before adding, this is not a request. It is a demand. The weight of her words filled the room. Everyone understood. This was not just about fixing a mistake. It was about changing the culture of the hotel from the ground up. Ava's eyes swept over the room one last time. Make no mistake, things will change. And anyone who refuses to be part of that change? She let the silence stretch. You're free to leave. No one moved. Ava nodded. Good. Because I will be watching. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a team that had just received the wake-up call of their careers. But she wasn't done yet. She had a hotel to rebuild, not in appearance, but in values. And she was just getting started. In the days that followed, Ava Sinclair's resolve was put to the test. The hotel was buzzing with uncertainty. Employees had been left shaken, but there was a newfound sense of urgency. Everyone knew that what had happened could never be allowed to repeat itself. Ava wasn't just angry. She was determined to rebuild the culture of her business, and she expected everyone to be on board with her vision. The first step in her plan was a thorough audit. Ava personally reviewed guest complaints, employee reports, and feedback from both in-house and online platforms. She also looked into the staff's past behavior, especially the front desk personnel who had failed her. What she found only deepened her resolve. It wasn't just about bad customer service. It was about a deep-rooted issue of bias. The complaints weren't isolated incidents. They were patterns. And they weren't just about one or two bad apples. There were systemic problems within the staff's attitudes, behaviors, and assumptions. It was clear that many employees had allowed their own prejudices to influence how they treated guests, especially those who didn't fit a certain mold. Ava knew she needed to make a bold move. The culture shift required action, not just words. She called an all-staff meeting. Every single employee was to attend, from the lowest-level workers to the highest-ranking managers. No exceptions. The day of the meeting, the tension in the air was palpable. Staff members filled the grand ballroom of the hotel, murmuring among themselves as they took their seats. Ava stood at the front of the room, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. She didn't need to say a word to command attention. Everyone knew why they were there. Ava began by addressing the elephant in the room, the incident with the receptionist. I'm sure you all know by now what happened, she said, her voice carrying across the room. And I'm sure many of you have heard rumors or gossip about it. But I want to make something clear. What happened that day was unacceptable. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. I built this hotel with a very specific vision in mind. A vision of inclusion. A place where every guest, no matter their race, gender, or background, should feel welcome. But what I learned is that my vision has been compromised. There was a collective shift in the room. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others stood rigid, bracing for what was coming next. This is not just about one isolated incident, Ava continued. This is about something much bigger, a deep-rooted issue within our staff. We have allowed biases, both conscious and unconscious, to shape how we treat our guests. And that ends now. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling on the group like a heavy blanket. Ava wasn't asking for their opinions. She was making it clear that things were going to change. From this point forward, she said, her voice firm and resolute, every one of you will undergo mandatory diversity and inclusion training. This isn't just a seminar. This is a chance for each of us to reflect on our own biases and learn how to be better. We will be doing deep work. And if you can't handle that, then you won't be part of this company anymore. There were murmurs of disbelief. But Ava didn't back down. She was focused and unwavering. We are a hotel, yes, but we are also a family. A family built on the values of respect, empathy, and excellence. And I expect every single one of you to embody those values in your work. She made direct eye contact with the front desk staff, who looked visibly uneasy. That includes you. Ava knew that the change wouldn't be immediate. It would take time to reprogram attitudes, to break down years of ingrained behavior. But this was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the hotel underwent an overhaul. Employees participated in rigorous training sessions led by top experts in diversity, inclusion, and hospitality. It wasn't just about changing the way they interacted with guests. It was about teaching them how to actively listen, how to be aware of their own biases, and how to build rapport with guests from all walks of life. Ava herself was deeply involved in the process, meeting with trainers and overseeing every step of the program. She also made sure that employees had access to counseling sessions, where they could reflect on their own experiences and examine how those experiences shaped their perceptions. Simultaneously, Ava revamped the hiring process. She wanted to ensure that new hires were fully aligned with the values of respect and inclusivity that were now central to the hotel's mission. She instructed the HR department to focus on recruiting individuals who demonstrated a deep commitment to diversity and equality. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Guests, once skeptical, began to feel the shift. They reported feeling more welcome, more valued, and more comfortable during their stays. Online reviews started reflecting this change, with people praising the staff's newfound attentiveness and warmth. But Ava wasn't done yet. She knew that a business could only change if the leadership itself was committed to the cause. So, she turned her focus to the senior managers and department heads. She pulled each one into her office for a one-on-one meeting. These were the people who were responsible for setting the tone within their departments, and Ava wasn't going to allow them to get off easy. "I want you to understand something," she told the general manager, Mark, during their meeting. "The culture of this hotel is a direct reflection of your leadership. If there is any more discrimination, any more bias, I will not hesitate to make changes at the top." Mark nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Ava continued, "This hotel is a business, yes, but it's also a statement. We are making a stand for what's right, and we're going to do it together. If you don't believe in that, if you're not willing to fully commit, then we part ways." She wasn't afraid to make the hard decisions. If any of her leaders weren't on board, she was ready to move forward without them. Over the next several months, the transformation was undeniable. Ava saw a marked improvement in the way staff treated guests and each other. The hotel began to truly embody the values of respect, inclusivity, and excellence. But the true test came when Ava was once again in the lobby, this time as a guest. She walked through the front doors and was immediately greeted with warm smiles from the staff. The receptionist at the desk addressed her by name and asked if she needed any assistance. There were no cold stares, no dismissive gestures, just a genuine desire to make her feel welcome. As she checked in, Ava felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the hotel she had envisioned. This was the change she had fought for. Ava had built this empire not just with hard work, but with integrity. She had fought for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. And now, her hotel was stronger than ever. With that, Ava knew that she had truly reclaimed her vision. But this was just the beginning of her journey toward making the world a better place, one hotel and one guest at a time. In conclusion, Ava Sinclair's determination to transform her hotel's culture proves that true leadership isn't just about success, but about standing up for what's right. By addressing the issues head-on, fostering inclusion, and holding her team accountable, Ava rebuilt her hotel into a place where every guest and employee feels respected and valued. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that positive change is possible when you lead with integrity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.